Imagine waking up from a peaceful slumber, only to be jolted awake by a thunderous crash. You open your eyes to find a meteorite, yes, a meteorite, has just smashed through your roof and struck you while you were napping on your couch. This is not a scene from a science fiction movie. This is the shocking reality for Ann Hodges on that fateful day in November 1954. The grapefruit-sized rock left her with a massive bruise, but more importantly, it marked her as the first documented person in history to survive such an extraordinary event. But Ann's story is just the beginning. What if you found yourself plummeting through the sky, and then you have the chilling realization that both of your parachutes were failing, with only seconds to react? What if you were trapped underwater in a sunken ship, fighting for breath in complete darkness? Or what if you faced a brutal attack that left you for dead, only to rise again with an unbreakable spirit? In this video, we will journey through the harrowing and awe-inspiring survival stories of 5 remarkable individuals. Join us as we uncover the extraordinary lengths to which these survivors went to reclaim their lives. But before we dive in, some of the details in these stories are extremely disturbing and may not be suitable for all audiences, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. As always, remember to hit the like button, share the video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to stay up to date with the channel. Alright, let's dive into the video. On a seemingly ordinary afternoon, November 30th, 1954, Ann Hodges was nestled under her quilts, taking a well-deserved nap on her couch in Sylacauga, Alabama. Little did she know, the universe had other plans for her that day. At precisely 12:46 p.m., a meteorite, weighing approximately 8.5 pounds, hurtled through the atmosphere, splitting into fragments as it descended towards Earth. One of those fragments would soon change Ann's life forever. As the meteorite crashed through the roof of her home, it created a gaping hole 3 feet wide, ricocheted off a console radio, and struck Ann directly on her hip. The impact jolted her awake, and for a moment she was disoriented, believing that her gas space heater had exploded. When she finally gathered her wits and saw the grapefruit-sized rock lying on the floor, her first thought was that children had vandalized her home. Ann's mother, who was in another room, rushed to her side, and together they grappled with the bewildering scene before them. Dust swirled in the air, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. They called the police and fire department, unsure of what had just occurred. By the time Ann's husband, Eugene, arrived home later that evening, he was met with the startling news of the little excitement that had transpired. But for Ann, the excitement was far from over. The injury itself, a large bruise on her upper thigh, was not life-threatening, but the emotional toll was profound. Ann struggled to sleep that night, plagued by anxiety and confusion. The following day, she sought medical attention, not for her physical injury, but to cope with the distress of the incident. As news of the meteorite strike spread, it became a national sensation. Reporters flocked to the Hodges home, eager to capture the story of the first documented person to be struck by a meteorite. Ann was suddenly thrust into the limelight, a celebrity in her own right, but the attention was overwhelming. She was featured in Life magazine, and her story was broadcasted across the nation. However, the aftermath of the incident was not without its challenges. The meteorite, which was later confirmed to be a chondrite, became the center of a legal battle. The landlady of the house, Bertie Guy, claimed ownership of the meteorite, arguing that it belonged to the property owner. This sparked a year-long legal dispute between the Hodges and Mrs. Guy, with public sentiment largely siding with Ann. The legal battle took its toll on Ann's health. While her physical injuries healed, her emotional well-being began to deteriorate. Eugene noted a significant change in Ann's behavior. Her shyness morphed into social anxiety, and she displayed signs of what appeared to be post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The couple ultimately divorced in 1964, a decision they both attributed to the upheaval caused by the meteorite incident. After a settlement was reached, Ann was able to keep the meteorite, but the excitement surrounding it had faded. Offers that once reached as high as $5,500 dwindled, and by 1956, Ann decided to sell the meteorite to the Alabama Museum of Natural History for a mere $25. a decision made against her husband's wishes. Despite the notoriety and the media frenzy, Anne Hodges found little solace in her newfound fame. The very event that catapulted her into the public eye also left her feeling isolated and anxious. She became a recluse, avoiding the spotlight that had once seemed so alluring. Anne's health continued to decline, and she spent her later years in a nursing home, battling the emotional scars left by her brush with being a celebrity. In the end, Anne Hodges passed away from kidney failure on September 10, 1972. Her story, however, lives on. The meteorite that struck her remains on display at the Alabama Museum of Natural History, a testament to the bizarre and extraordinary nature of her experience. Easter Sunday, 2015. Victoria Cilliers, a 40-year-old physiotherapist and an experienced skydiver, stood at the open doorway of a small aircraft, 14,000 feet above the Wiltshire countryside. Her husband Emil had gifted her this skydive as a way to rekindle their troubled marriage. But little did Victoria know, it would soon become a fight for her life. As Victoria stepped out of the plane and began her freefall, the unthinkable happened. Her main parachute failed to open. Remaining calm, she followed her training and she quickly cut her main parachute away and began reaching for her reserve parachute. But to her horror, it too malfunctioned, the canopy only partially inflating. Victoria was now hurtling towards the ground at 120 miles per hour, with no way to slow her descent. For Victoria, time seemed to slow to a crawl. In those terrifying moments, her mind raced with thoughts of her two young children waiting for her on the ground. But for her, giving up was not an option. She had to keep fighting. As Victoria neared the earth, she braced for impact. The fall was so severe that onlookers were convinced she would not survive. A body bag was brought to the scene, but miraculously, Victoria hit the ground with a sickening thud and lived. She had landed in a recently plowed field, the soft earth cushioning her fall. Still, the impact left her with devastating injuries, a broken spine, pelvis, and ribs, as well as a collapsed lung. In the days that followed, as Victoria lay in the hospital, battered and bruised but alive, the police began to investigate the cause of the parachute failure. What they uncovered will shock you to your core. Forensic analysis revealed that both of Victoria's parachutes had been tampered with. The slinks, the vital components that connect the canopy to the harness, were missing from her main parachute. Her reserve chute had been packed incorrectly, ensuring it would not open properly. The odds of both parachutes malfunctioning due to mere chance were astronomical. Someone had tried to kill Victoria Cilliers. As the investigation deepened, all signs pointed to one person, Victoria's own husband, Emil. The evidence was damning. In the days before the jump, Emil had taken Victoria's parachute into the bathroom, claiming their young daughter needed to use the toilet. He had also searched for wet nurses online, suggesting he knew Victoria would not survive the fall and he would need help caring for their baby. Emil's motive was clear. He was heavily in debt and wanted to cash in on Victoria's life insurance policy to start a new life with his mistress. He had even tried to kill Victoria and their children just weeks earlier by leaving the gas on in their home. The family narrowly escaped unharmed. In May 2018, after 2 trials, Emil Cilliers was found guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 18 years. Throughout the ordeal, Victoria remained loyal to her husband, refusing to believe he could have committed such a heinous act. Today, Victoria lives in Wiltshire with her 2 children, working as a physiotherapist for the Ministry of Defense. In her memoir, I Survived, she recounts her harrowing experience and the long road to recovery, both physically and mentally. On May 26, 2013, Harrison O'Keefe, a 29-year-old cook, was aboard the Jascon 4 tugboat, working off the coast of Nigeria. The vessel was stabilizing an oil tanker when disaster struck. A sudden and powerful wave crashed into the boat, causing it to capsize and plunge 100 feet into the dark, unforgiving depths of the Atlantic Ocean. In an instant, the lives of the 12-member crew were changed forever. As the ship sank, Harrison was inside the bathroom, preparing for his shift. The violent motion of the vessel threw him to the floor, and he quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Water rushed in, filling the cabin and trapping him inside. In a desperate bid to escape, he struggled against the jammed door, but the force of the water was overwhelming. Just as he thought all hope was lost, he stumbled into an air pocket, a small bubble of air trapped within the wreckage. In that moment, Harrison found himself alone in the pitch blackness, surrounded by the cold embrace of the ocean. He was terrified, but he knew he had to stay calm. Panic would only lead to disaster. With only the dim light of a flashlight and a few meager supplies, he began to assess his dire situation. For the next 3 days, Harrison clung to life in that air pocket, battling the darkness, cold, and the rising water around him. He managed to find 2 mattresses, stacking them to create a makeshift raft that kept him partially above the water. His supplies consisted of a small amount of food and cola, which he rationed carefully. As the hours turned into days, the reality of his predicament began to sink in. As the air thinned and the carbon dioxide levels rose, Harrison's thoughts turned to his family. He prayed fervently, calling out to God for help. He fought against the creeping despair, reminding himself that fear could kill him faster than the rising water. "I tried to kill the fear in front of me," he later recounted, "because one thing that can kill you fast is fear." On the 3rd day, as hope began to wane, Harrison spotted a light filtering through the darkness. It was the first sign of life he had seen since the accident. Divers from a recovery team had arrived to search for bodies. As they navigated the wreckage, one diver felt a gentle tug on his arm. Initially assuming it was a dead body, he was shocked to discover that it was Harrison, alive and gripping his hand. In that miraculous moment, the diver exclaimed, "He's alive! He's alive!" The rescue team quickly sprang into action, but they knew they had to proceed with caution. Harrison had been submerged for nearly 60 hours, and bringing him to the surface too quickly could result in decompression sickness, commonly known as the bends. Carefully, the divers suited Harrison with a diving helmet and guided him into a diving bell designed to maintain pressure. As they began their ascent, Harrison lost consciousness, but the team's meticulous planning ensured he was brought safely to the surface. After spending 2 days in a decompression chamber, he awoke to the realization that he was the sole survivor of the tragic incident. Harrison's ordeal did not end with his rescue. The psychological scars of his experience lingered long after he returned to the surface. He suffered from nightmares and anxiety, haunted by the memories of his time trapped in the dark depths of the ocean. Yet even in the face of such trauma, Harrison found a way to reclaim his life. In 2015, determined to confront his fears, Harrison retrained as a commercial diver. He embraced the ocean once more, this time as a professional. "I have faced a lot of my fears in my life, and I decided to face this once and for all," he said in a recent interview. The diver who had rescued him presented him with his diving diploma, a poignant reminder of his incredible journey from survivor to diver. Today, Harrison O'Keen continues to work in the diving industry, making underwater repairs on oil and gas facilities. He has transformed his harrowing experience into a source of strength, proving that even the darkest moments can lead to profound personal growth. On a frigid December night in 1980, the small town of Lengby, Minnesota, was blanketed in snow, the air biting with temperatures plunging to -22 degrees Fahrenheit or -30 degrees Celsius. 19-year-old Jean Hilliard was driving home after a visit with friends when disaster struck. As she navigated the icy roads, her car skidded off the road and into a ditch, leaving her stranded in the merciless cold. With no cell phones to call for help, Jean faced a difficult choice: stay in the car and risk freezing to death, or brave the freezing temperatures and walk to her friend's house nearby. Dressed in only a winter coat, mittens, and cowboy boots, she decided to venture out into the night, believing she could make the short trek to safety. But the icy conditions proved treacherous. As she made her way, Jean slipped on the ice and lost consciousness, collapsing just a few feet from her friend's front door. For 6 long hours, Her body lay face down in the snow, succumbing to the effects of extreme cold. It would take until morning for anyone to notice her absence. At approximately 7 a.m., Wally Nelson, her friend, stepped outside and was horrified to find Jean's lifeless body in his yard. He rushed to her side, instantly recognizing her but fearing the worst. "I thought she was dead," he later recounted. "She was frozen stiff, but I saw a few bubbles coming out of her nose." With no time to waste, Wally carried her to his truck and sped to Foston Hospital, about 10 minutes away. Upon arrival, the medical staff was met with an unimaginable sight. Jean's body was frozen solid, her skin pale and rigid, her heart barely registering at just 12 beats per minute. The doctors struggled to insert an IV into her frozen arm, breaking several needles in the process. Dr. George Sather, one of the attending physicians, recalled the grim prognosis. "We thought she was close to death," he said. "Her temperature was so low that we couldn't even get a reading from a thermometer." The medical team believed that Jean had little chance of survival, yet they decided to try warming her body with heating pads, hoping against hope that she might respond. In a miraculous turn of events, after a few hours of being warmed, Jean began to stir. The doctors were astounded. "I can't explain why she's alive," Dr. Sather later remarked. "She was frozen stiff, literally. It's a miracle." As Jean slowly regained consciousness, her first coherent thought was a concern for her father and his reaction to the damaged car. She described her experience as feeling like she had simply fallen asleep and then awoken in a hospital. Remarkably, she exhibited no signs of severe brain damage despite her prolonged exposure to the extreme cold. The recovery process was not without its challenges. Jean experienced muscle spasms and had to relearn how to move her limbs, but her spirit remained unbroken. Within a week, she was able to walk again, and after 7 weeks in the hospital, she was discharged with only minor injuries, a few numb toes and some blisters that would heal over time. In interviews following her recovery, Jean expressed her disbelief at the outcome. "I didn't see a light or anything like that," she said, reflecting on her experience. "It's a little disappointing for people who expect a near-death experience to be something profound." Jean's story quickly gained national attention, earning her the nickname the Miracle Girl from Lengby. She appeared on various talk shows, including interviews with Tom Brokaw on NBC's Today Show. Her miraculous recovery became a topic of fascination for both the medical community and the public, prompting discussions about the limits of human survival. Dr. Sather and his colleagues were left pondering the medical implications of Jean's case. How could someone survive being frozen solid for hours? Some speculated that her body chemistry, or the alcohol she had consumed earlier that night, may have played a role in preventing severe internal damage. Despite the intense scrutiny and media attention, Jean returned to a relatively normal life. She married, had children, and later divorced. Today she works at Walmart in Cambridge, Minnesota, and reflects on her extraordinary experience with a sense of humility and gratitude. On a fateful night in December 1994, Alison Botha's life changed forever. The 27-year-old insurance broker from Port Elizabeth, South Africa, had just dropped off a friend and was pulling into her apartment complex when two men, later identified as Frans Dutoit and Theuns Kruger, forced their way into her car at knife point. The men drove Alison to a secluded nature reserve where they brutally raped her. But their horrific acts did not end there. They proceeded to stab her over 30 times, disemboweling her and nearly decapitating her by slashing her throat from ear to ear. Leaving her for dead, the men fled the scene, unaware that Alison was still clinging to life. Alison's body was discovered hours later by a passerby. She had managed to write the names of her attackers in the sand and drag herself to the side of the road where she was found. Miraculously, she was still breathing. Alison was rushed to the hospital, where doctors were astonished to find her alive. Her injuries were so severe that they had never encountered anything like it before. Her throat had been cut so deeply that her head was barely attached to her body, and her internal organs were spilling out of her abdomen. Her determination to live and her will to overcome the trauma were unwavering. She refused to let her attackers win. In 1995, Du Toit and Kruger were convicted of kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder. They were sentenced to 2 life terms each. Allison's story quickly gained national attention, and she became known as a symbol of resilience and hope. Despite the immense physical and emotional scars, Allison embarked on a remarkable journey of healing and self-discovery. She wrote a book titled I Have Life, which chronicled her ordeal and recovery. The book became a bestseller and was later adapted into a documentary film. Allison's advocacy work began when she started speaking out against violence and supporting other survivors. She founded the Allison Survivor Foundation, which provides counseling and support services to victims of crime. Her message of resilience and hope has inspired countless individuals around the world. Today, Allison Botha is a motivational speaker, author, and advocate for victims' rights. She has received numerous awards and accolades for her work, including the South African Police Service's Woman of the Year Award. As we conclude this exploration of extraordinary survival stories, we are reminded of the incredible resilience displayed by each of the individuals we've encountered. Anne Hodges, who faced a cosmic bullet and emerged with her life. Victoria Cilliers, who defied death when both her parachutes failed. Harrison O'Keefe, who survived 60 hours trapped in a sunken ship. Jean Hilliard, who was frozen solid yet came back to life. And Allison Botha, who transformed her trauma into a powerful message of hope and healing. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to keep watching, then check out these videos on the screen now. If you have a topic suggestion, please send it to the email in the description. And as always, remember to like, comment, share the video, and subscribe to our channel. And remember, the only thing scarier than these stories is missing out on our next video.